So I started rattling off the different things that I could mention, like I'm doing tonight, and along with some of the things that we'd already won. He said, well, I'm gonna stop you there. He's like, you guys got too much development going on, and we're a rural development. And it kind of took me back, because I didn't think that was a phrase any developer would ever say. So I feel like there's a shift happening in Defiance, and it's one that we've all been working really hard for. I still consider Defiance rural, but here you had a development. So anyways, I'll wrap up with that. Any questions?
Great job, thanks.
Very good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your hard work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, with that, I've reviewed the index minutes from the city council meeting for April 26th. Do we have any motions to correct or amend the index minutes as presented? If not, I will sign them. Do we have any liaison meeting reports or requests? Mr. Hancock.
Yes, excuse me. I believe we have a finance,
Just a reminder for
yes.
finance
next Tuesday.
liaison meeting
I
before the
believe.
council of a whole during regular session,
Committee of the whole.
committee of the whole,
What time?
7 o'clock next Tuesday. Thank you,
Mr.
just a reminder, we kind of set it up last week, but.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any comments?
The taller grass is being mowed. I've noticed that there's been more than a few people that have mowed them, and it just doesn't seem like people have any conscious of what the causal effects to that is. And I know it's been mentioned here before, and I guess I just want to mention.
I got a couple things, but to touch on what Joe said, I've noticed a couple of the contractors really done that. They're blowing it all over the streets.
The lawn mowing country.
Yeah, the lawn mowing companies are the ones that's really done it bad. I've seen a lot of them guys doing it, so. The other thing I had is, I drove down there, people were complaining about it. There's rodents and groundhogs and everything living there, but the guy's got some kind of wood stuff going on behind the house. I don't know what he's, if you go over on Perry Street and drive up behind the old Fitzgerald Red building there and look over, it's a mess back there.
Okay.
And I don't know what it is, but I'm sure that property is not its own commercial. To be running a business back there, whatever it is he's doing.
I'm not sure of the zoning, but there are some commercial areas within that framework. But I think that the area and the property that you speak of,
Yard is a mess.
I'll have Mr. Dirk take a look at it.
Yeah, and the people are, a lot of people, I've had 3 calls, so I go over there and there is groundhogs running. I mean, he's just creating a habitat there for, I mean, it's bad. So.
We'll take a look.
Something needs to be addressed there. So.
Thank you. Mr. Uresti?
I have one other comment. I didn't get the address, but there's a property on Laddie Street. Evidently they're cleaning out the inside of the house or doing something, but there's if everybody's seen it, there's furniture and other things along the edge.
Alley.
Yeah.
It was going by there the other day.
Is it?
Well, it was going the other day unless they put more
Well,
out
we
there.
drove by, I don't know, today, yesterday.
I've been watching it too, that alley.
Okay.
Today.
Anyways, the question comes down to this, that there are changes that take place with residencies. And when they do take furnitures out, because in essence, they're moving the individual out, the individual hasn't done it, and they stack it up along the edge of the street, how long can they keep that there, or what would be the expectation? They just can't leave it there until somebody's gonna pick it up? Who's gonna pick it up?
So we've had this come up actually in the downtown as well. And we can't interfere with the court eviction set out processes. But what we've discussed with some of the court staff is once the items go out on the curb, they become a nuisance at that point.
Right.
So we can't ban them from taking it out to the curb, right? But once they go out to the curb, that property owner has to figure out a way to dispose of it, or it has to be right before bulk pickup.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mast?
Since we're on the topic of lawn mowing, I just wanted to share a conversation that I had with the senior citizen resident on Saturday, and she was expressing some concerns about the lawn mowing companies and her ability to actually engage one to mow her lawn. She said it's becoming tougher and tougher, and that she has a small lawn and she can't get anybody to mow it, and she's been at times put off for 2 weeks and saying, yes, we'll get to it, yes, we'll get to it. Well, her concern is she doesn't want to get a nuisance sign, obviously. Is there any recourse if she's waiting on and being put off? Is there anything she can do to avoid? And her concern is that I guess a lot of the landscaping and mowing companies are kind of shifting gears towards bigger projects, and some of these seniors with their smaller lawns and their sidewalks who can't take care of it themselves are kind of getting left out in the cold as far as it goes, so.
If you want to give us her name after the meeting, that maybe we could contact her. The nuisance is, once established, you have so many days to comply, so you're gonna start running the course in the nuisance process, right? And by the time you do that, the sign goes out, she may have it done, she's gonna be required to.
Issue too, though.
So, look, we'll try to work with the property owner as
Yeah, but
best we can.
she wants to avoid that stigma,
I get it.
obviously, of
Yeah.
a nuisance sign.
You give me your name afterwards and we'll be in
I don't know
contact
if there's
with
any other recourse that we have for getting seniors' lawns mowed, for the people who just, absolutely can't mow or can't shovel their sidewalk.
We don't,
Kids.
at this point.
I know.
And I should mention the code affords Mr. Leonard some discretion, so if it is like a situation like that, he doesn't have to, he can if he wants, but he doesn't have to bring the hammer down.
Right.
And Mr. Dirk's also
My
very
comment
reasonable.
was definitely don't shy away from calling City Hall. I mean, that's
Right.
what I told her, so. But I just wanted to, it was her speaking on behalf of herself and her sister, so there are people out there with the concern.
Leonard's Lawn Service, I like the sound of it.
That's it.
I already have one of those. Want me to give you the address?
Mr. Corbett?
I like that idea, but is there any service organizations that might want to take on a task or two that we can reach out to? And that's not the question I have. I want to ask if we've got an update on Spectrum boring and putting the new fiber optic line into this building yet.
Any day now, I believe.
Okay.
Last communication we had with them was a few weeks ago, and they thought it would be the first week of May. But I don't believe we've heard from them yet. It's the 3rd. We'll see. We can follow up again.
Any other questions? Comments? There's nothing on my desk right at the moment. Mayor McCann?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just 3 items from me today. First of all, Mrs. Crutch, I realize you're retired, but it's my understanding today is National Teachers Day.
It is. National Teacher Appreciation.
Congratulations to all the teachers. They have a tough job.
Yes.
Yesterday, most of the Board of Control toured the water treatment plant. Adam McDowell and Joe Ewers showed us the new GAC system that's not entirely operational. I believe we'll receive as many as 2 more of those rather annoying letters that tell you the water is not safe to drink. It's always been safe to drink, but 2 more of those will probably go out yet. And people are gonna say, well, hold it, what's going on here? But I think Adam is also gonna maybe write a letter to the editor to explain things a little more thoroughly, and he and Mr. Hellberg are working on that, so that will still happen. And just finally, I think most of you know, I know Mr. Mast, you were there, from NOCAC were there, I'd guess around 20 or so of them, just about all the tree commission members. I just want to compliment Rob Sarrigan and Christy Feeney from the office here, and Pat Bone, who's a tree commission member, for just what they did. I will tell you, and again, every teacher knows that those little ones listened intently and watched while some would say that Mr. Bone and Mr. Sarrigan dug a hole. They don't dig a hole, they sculpt a hole. And how they slope the sides down, how deep it should be, the backfill, how they prepared the ball on the oak tree that was planted. It was very, very nice event, very heartwarming, and Rob and Christy and Pat are to be commended. And I've said before, we have a great tree commission, we do. That's all I have.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Leonard?
Just to go back to the mayor and the letters going out, the one thing you have to realize, it's a running average of 4 quarters for testing. So when we put the plan online, the water quality is much better, but it has to average in with 4 quarters of the activity. So 3 quarters of that is not good water quality or substandard or what you would consider to be less improved than what we had before, especially with GAC. But now that we've got this online, you'll see numbers better, but more than likely the averages, well, it takes some time for that to come down. So that's all I have.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question.
Mr. Esty?
For some of the water, when it goes out into the residence and it doesn't loop, would they still have problems with the water quality?
You would have problems with their water quality when you run into like dead-end lines. So if it doesn't loop, right, or there's little activity, the water can sit stagnant in those lines for a period of time.
Mr. President?
Mr. O'Donnell?
I have nothing for you at this time.
And Mr. Leonard?
Right now, just one quick thing, we have a purchase order that falls between $15,000 and $25,000 to report to council. Again, it's fuel, and I think I reported several weeks ago, the cost of fuel has hit a point where, we're getting some loads of bulk fuel that are exceeding $15,000. This one was $18,897 no, I take that back, this one, no, it was $18,897 to Porter's BP, and that's a purchase out of the streets department. That's all right, that's all for now.
All right, thank you. We do have 4 items of legislation for consideration this evening. Would you read the caption of the first one? Ms. Ellers?
First reading by caption only, an ordinance ratifying the conveyance of municipal.
At that time, we still had some due diligence, the company still had some due diligence to conduct. We had some back and forth communications and meetings with the end user, to Senderlo Curley Incorporated. And since then, more importantly, a new council term has begun. And so that requires ratification under Rule 26 that authorizes you to ratify a prior ordinance. And so what this ordinance does is ratifies and reconfirms the action you took last November and authorize Leonard to go ahead and execute the purchase agreement and any of the closing documents for this transfer to the CIC. CIC will then transfer it to Senderlo Curley, the end user.
For Mr. O'Donnell, Mr. Waxler?
No further question, no suspend and call.
Motion to suspend and call?
Second.
Second, Mrs. Crutch?
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch? Yes. And Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Right, Mr. Engel?
Motion adopt.
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Second, Mr. Corbett?
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch? Yes. Mr. Engel?
Yes.
And Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Okay, this ordinance is adopted.
First reading by caption only, an ordinance authorizing a purchase agreement accepting the dedication of a right-of-way to extend Commerce Drive and declare an emergency.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Mr. President, the city is moving forward, preparing for the full construction of the Commerce Drive plans from Carpenter Road to Domersville Road. And last meeting, I believe you approved the 2 crossing agreements across the Michigan Southern Railroad. If we can bring up the survey plat, Madam Clerk. It's further, one more. So, last meeting, you approved the crossing agreements for both the roadway and the 2 pipelines to go over the railroad. The only piece left is right here. This is owned by Richland Stryker. Generation LLC, otherwise known as or also known as the Peking Plant. And Richland Stryker, after their parent company Dynegy, after several rounds of communication and negotiations, and actually redesigning the road, re-engineering the road design, agreed to convey this parcel, or more accurately, dedicate it as a right-of-way. It's 1.037 acres. All of it's going to be part of the official right-of-way. And in exchange, the offer is to pay Richland Stryker the $10,000 and give them one free tap on the new water line. So your authorization of this would fit one more piece in this Commerce Drive puzzle and enable us to enter into that agreement for that right-of-way dedication.
Thank you. Mr. Waxler?
No further question, no suspending call.
We have no other questions, motion to suspend and call.
Second.
Second, Mr. Mast.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Ingo?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
And Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
And
Motion to adopt.
to adopt Mr. Mast. Second, Mr. Waxler.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Ingo?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
And Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
This ordinance is also adopted.
First reading by caption only, an ordinance authorizing a contract for landscaping maintenance and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Leonard?
Thank you. You know, as the council is well aware, the council and the administration, the city as a whole has made great strides over the last several years to concerted effort for towards beautification projects in public spaces. Last year, we made the decision to hire the Mangus organization, company who does landscape work, to help maintain some of the areas that we have put money into. Last year, we spent about $25,000 with the company, and we're looking to enter into a contract for them to do similar work in 2022. The contract we're looking at is $32,179. It's about a $7,500 increase over what we did last year, but it actually includes several areas in addition to what we had last year, and that's actually about $6,900 worth of the additional cost. I'll quickly run down this because it's interesting to note. So we're talking about, you're well aware of the new park signs we have all over the place. And they all have beds, flower beds, landscaping, Deal Park, Bronson Park, Laddie's Grove, the Disc Golf Course, Holgate Park, East Side Park, Riverside Park, and the Reservoir. You know, they're kind of labor intensive, even though they're small, and they take some specialized care that, you know, quite honestly, this company has done a great job with, and we want them to continue to do that. In addition to those park sign areas, we're talking about work on city property within Pontiac Park, the Rotary Walkway, Library Rain Garden, some additional grounds work at the Fort grounds, Perry Street parking lot, plantings on the Purple Heart Bridge, and then the newer areas that will be in 2022 that we didn't have last year would be some landscape maintenance at the Splash Park, the library parking area, an additional section of the Rotary Parkway, riverbank trees along the Fort grounds and Pontiac Park, and I guess some grassy area around the Purple Heart Bridge as well. So, again, the administration believes money well spent. I think the public and I think the council appreciates some of the, again, beautification efforts around town. We would ask you to authorize this contract.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Leonard? Mr. Rusty?
I think if we're gonna put things out there that represent our community, they should look nice. They have done a good job. If there's no other questions, motion to suspend and call.
One quick question.
Mr. Mast?
I'm assuming this is covering more than just throwing out some mulch, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah, it'll be maintenance throughout the year, weeding, mulching, probably watering where there are flowers, things like that. Yeah, it'll be an ongoing maintenance effort through the season.
Okay, and we have a motion to suspend and call.
Second.
Second, Mr. Corbett?
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
And Mr. Math?
Yes.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Crutch. Second, Mr. Hancock?
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Corbett? Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
And Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
This ordinance is also adopted. And lastly,
First reading by caption only, an ordinance authorizing a contract for the repair of a river pump for the water treatment plant and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. President. The water plant has a pump house consisting of three variable speed drive pumps that actually take the water from the intake in the wet well all the way to the reservoir. And one of those pumps has failed. We would like to replace that pump as soon as possible. And one of the reasons why is at one time, it wasn't a real emergency, but as you look at the windows of when we pump into the reservoir now, important the timing of when we pump into the reservoir. We actually have the technology now to actually monitor nitrates, monitor phosphorus, monitor a number of different organics within the water system, phosphorus. And what we want to do is actually take the opportunity to pump as much water as we can in the windows of time that we can. You might be surprised, but there are a lot of times, and you might hear it from your constituents, where the level of the reservoir is down low. And one of the reasons being, we don't always pump into the reservoir site because of the volatility of the river. And today, I can tell you that we're much more sophisticated in the way we manage our system. We actually know what's coming down the river, and we do this through sensor technology. And today, we can find out what's coming down that river. And one of the key components of what we do is we have small windows to when we can actually pump into our reservoir site. So having a pump down today is much more critical than it's ever been, because we want to make sure that we take advantage of putting good quality river water into the reservoir site so we're not fighting algae blooms. So what we'd like to do is replace one of those pumps that's failed. We want to do that as quick as we can. And we want to do it as quick as we can because as we monitor the rivers and what's coming down those rivers, it's critical that we take opportunities and advantages of small windows of when to pump, because the river is so volatile in what's coming down to our intake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Waxler.
No further question, we'll suspend the call.
We have no other questions. We have a motion to suspend and call. Second, Mr. Mast.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Crutch?
Yes. Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Crutch.
Second.
Second, Mr. Mast.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
And Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
And this ordinance is also adopted. With that, we've addressed the items of legislation for this evening. Citizens' concerns.
Todd, you
Aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. We're adjourned until next week, Tuesday the 10th.
Todd, you gotta go up with some concerns to keep us there longer.